Shall we make a start with the guest introductions then?
Let's. So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us for this Q&A. The culmination of what has been a fabulous fortnight of content from One-to-One Enfield. If you haven't had the chance to have a look at the content so far, it's all freely available on the website. No membership required, no sign up. You don't have to remember your grandmother's second first name or any of that nonsense. It's literally just pressing play every day. So do have a look at that if you get the chance. I believe it's going to stay up there for the foreseeable. So do have a look at that stuff. Some really fab stuff. I'm Dean Beadle. I am proud to be patron of One-to-One Enfield. I am an autistic speaker and presenter and trainer and singer and lots of other things. And I will be attempting to wrangle these folks through this Q&A over the next hour. So I will introduce each individual and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves. So let's go to Lana Grant first.
Hi, I knew you'd come to me first, Dean, and I suddenly had a blank. Yeah, I had a blank moment. My name's Lana, and I am an autistic author, speaker. I work particularly around pregnancy and autism, but I also work very much now with young people as well, so it's kind of a double-edged thing, where I work with lots of young people who are up and coming and trying to get diagnoses and things like that. So that's me. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Fabulous. And Katie Munday. Think she may need to be unmuted, admin folk. Shall we go to Sarah Jane for the moment and come
Sorry,
back?
I'm here now.
She's here. Katie
I'm
Munday.
here. They're here. Yeah, so my name's Katie Munday. I use they, them pronouns. I am, like everyone here, like a really busy autistic person. I am a youth work leader for disabled young people. I coach wheelchair basketball. I'm also an advocate, writer, creative, podcaster, list goes on. And the thing that I spoke about with the Spectrums conference, if anyone didn't catch it, was my master's research, which was on trans and or non-binary autistic experiences and narratives, which was really, really cool. And hopefully I'll be able to ask a few questions about that today if anyone has any.
Thank you, Katie. I did indeed catch that presentation. I listened to it yesterday on my walk to Asda, and it was fantastic. Other supermarkets are available. Sarah Jane Critchley, tell us about yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure, as ever, to work with One-to-One. You are absolutely phenomenal people. So thank you for doing what you do. I'm Sarah Jane Critchley. I'm an author, speaker, consultant and coach, and I've been knocking around the autism sector for far longer than I care to mention. And I spent a long time with the Autism Education Trust. I do a lot of work with individuals and families these days, and I am also now a proud autistic woman married to a proud autistic man with 2 proud autistic children. So that's us.
Fabulous. So that's your panel for this session. Let's dive into the questions. So we've been sent some excellent questions from some of our members and from folk who have been watching. So let's dive straight into them. Okay. So Peg asks us, in your experience and research, is it common for autistic people to get misdiagnosed with other conditions before getting an autism diagnosis, especially borderline personality disorder? And were you misdiagnosed beforehand? So let's go to Sarah Jane first.
The answer to that is, oh, heck yes. The answer is very, very common, very, very frequent, especially for folk who identify as female or who have been raised as female, because they tend to be identified as other things first. Their issues tend to be misidentified. So that happens frequently, and that's happened to lots of people I've worked with as well.
Lana, any thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, I also forgot to say that I identify as she, her, and I can't put my pronouns on there because I don't know how to do it. So I've said it, so it's there. Yeah, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and then when I had my children, it automatically seemed to be a rollover to postnatal depression. I think I did have postnatal depression the first time, because I think the trauma of birth that I've written about probably triggered that, but I never felt, I didn't feel as though I was depressed later on, but that was a constant, well, you're depressed, and then there were talks of bipolar, which I wasn't diagnosed with because I didn't recognise that as myself, and it was only after my son was diagnosed that somebody turned around and said, oh, do you know what, you might also be autistic. So, you know, yeah, and I was 38, so all those years of just being told I was shy or anxious or depressed, yeah, so yeah, it's and I see it with the work I do now with young people, to try and advocate for them to get a diagnosis. It's so hard.
Katie?
Yeah, I think like I was raised female, if you will. I was socialized as female, although that's never really fitted me because I'm non-binary and a great long list of other gender weirdness going on. But I think like I was not disruptive at school. I was like very intelligent, very clever. Like I got on with what I needed to get on with. I didn't cause any issue for anyone. Like all the issues that were caused from my being autistic and not knowing that I was autistic and ADHD and everything else that I've now realized in my early 30s that that's who I am. I think because of that, like there was no real need for the school or my parents or for anyone else to look like at me in any different way, like because I didn't seem to be causing any disruption to anybody else. And again, like Lana was saying, like I see that with the kids that I work with, like the kids who experience emotions in a really intense way and are very vocal or very kind of physical with how they experience things, tend to get the most support and diagnosis, which absolutely they should do, but it kind of sweeps the rest of us kind of under the carpet, really.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something to be said. One of the other questions that's come through later that I thought I could quickly throw in and address here is the discussion around sort of later identification and later diagnosis. And people often speak about, and I appreciate, as we've said, that late identification can follow years and years of being misunderstood and misdiagnosed and not supported and all of those things. But equally, people often think of early diagnosis as being, therefore, you've got the smoothest of paths. And actually, when that diagnosis is a very medical model and a list of criticisms and judgments, you've then got to unpick all of that at an age where you don't have a vocabulary to make sense of it. So I think it's an interesting path wherever you find diagnosis happens. And of course, some folk don't ever go in for diagnosis because of the barriers to diagnosis, because GP's lack of knowledge in referring often, but also some folk don't want to go and get diagnosis. It's just they work it out over time, that's who they are. I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that if you have a diagnosis earlier, the better you are. I think it depends on individual situation, doesn't it? And it depends on whether you're lucky to be surrounded by people that understand. I mean, in terms of misdiagnosis, I was never misdiagnosed, but I was certainly mislabeled. You know, difficult, naughty, inappropriate, sexually inappropriate, endless list, all by the age of about 7.5. And I think it's a path most of us have trod in one way or another. I guess the difference is being able to understand yourself earlier on, which is a beautiful thing. And I met one autistic lady who was 69, and she found out she was autistic the week before I was speaking to her, and she said, suddenly my entire life makes sense. You know, so there's a beauty, I think, in having a definite answer. But as I say, some people have that answer and they don't need it in paper, and power to them, and they're just as valid too. Okay, on to the next question. I'll stop rambling. It's not me meant to be answering them. So our friend Sally says, Sally's child was assigned female at birth, identifies as gender fawn and bisexual, and uses he, they pronouns. He was attending an all-girls school that turned out to be unsupportive of his newfound gender identity. Sally sought appropriate help from the local authority, and the school remained unwilling to accept and adapt. So her child is transferred to an SEMH school that is accepting of his gender and pronouns, but lacking appropriate understanding of autism and how to support him. Sally asks, how do we as parents best support and advocate with a school around our children's identity and choice of pronouns when that doesn't fit with single-sex placement of the school at which they're enrolled? And I think Katie first on that, if that's possible.
Wow, that's a multi-layered situation going on there. Let me just have a little second to process there. So he was going to an all-girls school. Unfortunately, with single-sex schools, I think there's still a lot of legal loopholes about gender and assigned sex and stuff like that. That means it's certainly definitely the case in the USA for, you know, saying, you know, you have to align in this way and you have to have these certain body parts and all the awful things that comes with that. But I'm surprised that he's having so much trouble in the, I never get it right, SEHM school, because I would think that quite a lot of the young people there would be autistic. So I find that quite surprising. I don't know that I necessarily have any advice, but like Stonewall, Mermaids are really good resources. I can also like put up a pack of resources and share with everyone, hopefully through one-to-one after this as well, because top of my head's a bit more difficult. But there does seem to be an issue with like, either people have a vague understanding of autism and autistic experience, or they might have a vague understanding of gender divergence, but the professionals and individuals that have are grounded in both are exceedingly rare, which is why I'm doing the work that I do. I'm sorry I don't have any more advice on that, but if I can put some resources together, is that something I can do, Dean, and then send out?
That would be fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure our team can make those available.
Excellent.
Lana, any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Katie that my child is in what's meant to be an autism specific school. They have lots of young people there of you know, different I mean, first up, I'll put a disclaimer up. Gender fluidity is not my area of expertise, so if I say something wrong, I apologize in advance, because I'm still learning terminology, because my kind of feeling is everyone is entitled to be exactly who they should be. But I find that even in schools, they try and talk about gender and that they get it and they support it, and it's the same with autism. They actually don't. They get their idea of what it should be and what they think it should be, and it's the kids. I think you said, Katie, didn't you, about, you know, you're surprised that in an SEMH school they're having a hard time. The thing is, you're right, the kids, a lot of the kids will get it, some of them won't, but a lot of them will. But it's the staff, and it's, if they don't get it, and I often think that unless you've walked that path, or you have family or friends, or you are in that community, they're not going to get it, and they're not as open-minded sometimes as they'd like to portray themselves. That's my feeling, I think.
Can I add something else in here?
Of course you can.
Yeah, I think like Section 28 isn't that far behind us either. Like, you know, for those who don't know, like when Maggie Thatcher was in power and she brought in Section 28, and basically it was made illegal for LGBTQIA plus anything brought up in schools, whether the teacher was gay, talking about relationship and sex education, anything like that. I mean, that only came out, that only stopped in 2003. And I don't know that relationship and sex education has come on that much since then. It sounds like a long time ago, and it is a long time ago, but and like, you know, people have been teaching for like 20, 30 years. If they're used to having a curriculum that is, it's forbidden to talk about anything that isn't, you know, cisgender and heterosexual, then that's a real culture shock. I'm not making excuses for anyone, but like that's a real culture shock. I think so many people are so afraid about getting it wrong that instead of just digging in and going, like Lana said, like, you know, I'm sorry, I'm new to this, I'm sorry if I slip up, that's absolutely fine. And instead of just skirting around the issue, I think people need to just dig in and learn as they go, really. I think people are just too scared to get it wrong, and instead of slightly getting it wrong every so often but doing 90% of the work, they'd much rather just not do any of it, which is quite worrying.
I think we live in a world where people are very frightened of making a mistake and being vilified on social media forevermore, aren't they? I think to a degree, I think the fact that social media gives everyone such a platform is a fabulous thing, but whether or not it actually enables discussion is another matter. And as both Katie and Lana have said, that we need to get it wrong in order to get it right. And it's about intent, I think. I think it's about, as Lana was saying, it's about folk who are often leading in schools on this have the best intentions, but do they necessarily have the knowledge? And that's why events like this are important. It's why we need autistic-led stuff being delivered in those settings, which we're all working on, but as well as gender-divergent led stuff, but delivered by gender-divergent people. Too many letters in each of these words. But by gender-divergent people delivering about gender-divergent issues. That's the way through, as both of you have said. And I wanted to pick up, before I go to Sarah Jane, on what Katie said about Section 28. And I was delivering some training on sex ed the other week, and really was thinking about this. 2003 was when it was taken out of law, and all of my sex ed happened before then. So I know lots about how not to make a woman pregnant. Has it come in handy to me? No. Have I been taught about safe sex in the gay context? No. The science is very different. Have I been, without going into too much detail, was I shown any representation of myself in anything that we were taught about? No. Still looking for a gay character in Biff and Chip. And thankfully, with people like Pop and Ollie and resources now being available where children can see themselves reflected. I know that Joe Butler's with us and does a lot of work on this as well up in Sheffield and in the north. This work's starting to happen, but there's generations of us who didn't see ourselves reflected, whether that's because we're gender divergent, because we're neurodivergent, because of our sexuality, didn't see ourselves reflected and were therefore othered for such a long period of time. And it's going to take us a long time to unpick all of that stuff, isn't it? So, Sarah Jane, any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, well, it was a huge question and a lot to unpack there. I think I'm really struck with the fact that schools remind me a lot of super tankers, that they're massive, enormous things that kind of corral everybody into them, go in one direction very clearly with very little ability to maneuver and to be fleet of foot. And what's happening in terms of gender identity and people not knowing who they are, not seeing themselves represented, is that this is a really fast moving area in terms of education, in terms of understanding, in terms of what makes sense socially, emotionally, and to individuals. But our schools are not well suited to changing immediately. They find it very, very difficult to do that. And it takes the person at the top to have the heart and the vision and the courage to say it's okay to be different, whatever that form of different might be, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's academic ability or lack of, or being passionate about culture or anything. And schools aren't always very good at doing that. The best schools are. So the best schools may have this huge, humongous tanker that's all trolling on in the same direction, but they'll allow some people to be out on the poop deck doing musical theatre and other people down in the engine room making sure it all goes in the right direction. And that they can contain all of that in this marvellous, amazing, fantastic cruise ship that gets people from youth to being slightly older, if the right person is in the place to do it. And if they are educated and if they are brave enough to say, I don't know all of this, I'm old, I will get it wrong. Please forgive me if I get it wrong. It's not intentional. I'm trying to do the best for you that I can, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And I was in a special school that wanted specific support in this area because they got a number of autistic students who were gender questioning and investigating who they were and how they were and how to deal with this, without pushing people down a line of, oh, you must be this because you're identifying as you're questioning, and not pushing people into you must conform to everything either. So to make sure that people have a range of opportunities available, that people understand that you can be different in a whole host of different ways, and gender is just one of those, and that they were able to support young people who are in that position in order to keep them alive. And let's not mince words. Sometimes we are working very carefully to try and keep people here long enough for them to explore who they are in detail. And that's why it matters, because people are seriously hurt by not feeling safe. So it's our job to do our best to support them. And sometimes that just comes down to families, because no one else can do it. They don't know the individual, they haven't gone through that journey, and they don't know how to make that person feel safe. What I loved about this school that I visited was that they did very simple things, like that everybody's obsessed with flipping toilets. This is kind of this toilet obsession that happens, like everybody doesn't need to go to the toilet. You know, we're humans, we all go to the toilet, it happens. You know, even the Queen, God bless her, apparently goes to the toilet. So, you know, it's what they did in this school was that they made one of the toilets just available, and it was available for anybody, irrespective of gender. You know, how difficult is that? It's just a toilet. It's not that hard. And that wasn't a massive adjustment that was required to be made. It was a very simple thing. The things that were more difficult, I think, were helping their peer group to work out how to cope with somebody whose identity is changing, and are they the same person? Are they still my friend if they were somebody before and now they're somebody else? And that required a bit more finesse to work. But it wasn't the institutional, oh my God, this person isn't conforming, what the hell do we do with them? And that, I think, is what we should be aiming for. And that, for me, was aspirational. Have they got it all right? No, of course not. But they've got the guts to try and to support people in the way that they need whilst they're doing that journey.
Absolutely. And there's some thinking here to be done on what a good practitioner looks like. You know, I've spent years having teachers come up to me at events, and I'm sure it's the same for all of us, coming up to us at events saying, what you've just said has made me realise that in 2002, I got it wrong for a child I was working with. And I say to them, that tells me you're a good practitioner, because you're reflecting. You're able to say, okay, something I tried 20 years ago didn't work. What can I do differently tomorrow? It's the people that are indifferent about whether what they're doing helps or works are the real issue. And a quick thought also to autistic teachers too, who are out there in the workplace, in education, who are pushing back against a tide of advocating for children. And a quick mention, she's not asked me to say this, but seeing as she's here, Lynn McCann has a fabulous free training course all about being an autistic teacher, predominantly led by an autistic teacher, and it's well worth having a look through Studio TV, I believe, Lynn. And it's free to access, and I've watched it myself. It's really fabulous, led by a fabulous autistic teacher, and Lynn, and it's great. And thoughts to them too, because they're growing in numbers, and I think that's how we'll make the biggest difference in education. And I think Katie alluded to this, is that those individuals are in decision-making positions, are in those positions of power, and can lead from the front. But it's about empowering those individuals to feel they can make those changes, because who better to understand our diverse youngsters than people who experience those same diversities themselves. Leading on to all of this, we've sort of talked about sexuality a little bit, we've talked about autism, we've talked about gender in younger folk, but I was wondering, this is a question I wanted to ask all of you, is, you know, obviously it's fabulous that there's generations of young folk now who hopefully, and it isn't to say the past's going to be smooth, because we live in a world that isn't as accepting as we like to think it is, but are benefiting from a new consciousness in terms of our understanding. It's growing all the time, and it's fabulous. Let's think for a moment about older generations of folk who have had to live their whole lives, or been made to feel their whole lives they couldn't be their authentic self, who are now seeing generations of folk being able to embrace their authentic self, and of course celebrating for those people, but maybe feeling a sense of grief for themselves for all of those years they might have felt they'd lost. So what can we do to support those folks to heal that trauma? Katie?
Oof. It's something I'm actually hoping to look at in PhD, actually, to do with intergenerational trauma, and about how working with it would be autistic and trans, because that's what I'm into. Autistic and trans young people, or like gender questioning, gender variant young people, also talking with kind of older adults. I'm talking like 50, 60 plus. And I think intergenerational work is important anyways, because there are just, whether you're divergent in any way or not, like the world that children live in is completely different to, even me as 31, is completely different to the schooling experience I had, or when I was a teenager, or like technology is mad. Like, you know, I had a Nokia 3330 and I loved it. You know, I played Snake. It took me like 5 years to text message someone. It was brilliant. We had dial-up internet. We thought it was the best, you know. So like even stuff like that, like I think a lot of healing can happen, and a lot of information can be shared between generations if we work and pull together in the same direction, I think.
Absolutely. Sarah Jane, any thoughts?
I think that's really interesting. So I've done quite a lot of work in coaching individuals over the last year, actually, plus. And a recurrent theme in the people who are coming forward are people who are late identified and late querying who they are and how to rationalise and make sense of their experience that they've had up to that point. And the reflections that I have in having talked to so many of them is that the first thing is just around giving permission to be who they are and what they need right now to feel okay. And some of that is going back and making sense of the experiences that they had. And some of that is around, as you said earlier, Dean, grieving for the life that they might have had. And you kind of have to let go of what could have been in order to embrace what can be now. And there's something really joyful about stepping into the person that you really know yourself to be right now and looking forwards and saying, well, that happened. Some of that was less than ideal. Let's be very polite about it because we're being recorded. And some of it was horrific. But now tomorrow can be different. And the day after can be better than that. And the day after that can be better still. And I'm doing a journey. It's not kind of, I know it's awfully hackneyed, oh, I'm on a journey, but you know, it is, we do, every day is a different experience, and we can add in a really joyful way to that experience. And one of the things that I love now is if you talk to really young people, as I do occasionally when I find a really young person, go, hello, really young person. And their attitude about all these things is so totally different. You think, wow, I have such a lot to learn. Thank you. Teach me, tell me. Tell me what it's like now. Tell me what I could explore. Tell me what's available now, because this is a whole new world. Go find a young person in a non-creepy way.
Lana, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I find lots of young people in a non-creepy way and work with lots of them. And I get into this, if I'm having a tough time, which has happened probably a lot more as I've become older, and I kind of look back, and then I get into this spiral of feeling that I never fulfilled my potential, that I haven't done anything with my life, and I could have done this if I'd have known when I was at college. I could have got support, and I could have, if I'd have been at university, I'd have got support. So I keep thinking I've not fulfilled these, and then I question the job that I'm doing. I think actually at my age, with my experience, I should be in a better position. I should be a manager of something, don't ask me what. And then once I've done all of that and got myself really, really worked up and thinking, oh, everything's just awful and terrible, then I am very lucky that my daughter, who is doing the same kind of work as me, is almost like a sounding board. And she'll say to me, but Mom, if you were a manager, you wouldn't work with the kids. And that's what it's all about for you. And she's right. So I am starting to come to that acceptance that I spend I hope my employer's not watching this. I spend a lot of time looking at jobs and thinking, I could do that. I could do that. And then I read the job description. It involves a lot of admin and a lot of, and yes, it's about shaping services sometimes. But then I just think, I'm not working with the kids. And I think because I'm probably still in my head about 10, that's my thing. So I think you're right, Sarah Jane. I think it's this journey that you go on. And I think as you get older, maybe you do start to recognize, actually, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And younger people have got it, you know, the ones that I work with, they'll say stuff like, you know, why can't we go to the toilet when we're in class? Why can't we do this? Why can't we challenge that? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You know, why don't staff show us respect, but they want us to respect them? So they are much more than I ever was. I mean, I didn't speak till I was 5. I mean, I make up for it now, but you know, and I was very quiet and shy and wouldn't, you know, rock the boat in any way. Not like that quite so much now. But these young people, they're out there, and this is from the work that everybody here, that other people are doing. So yeah, I probably lost track of what the question was, but hopefully somewhere in there I answered the question, Dean.
Absolutely, you did. And it spurred a thought for me. So over the last 2 years, when the whole world shut down in 2020, and we were talking about essential workers, for me, I didn't realise this at the time, it's only in hindsight. For me, what that did is it said to me, your work isn't essential. You can wait on the sideline. You're not important. And of course, that's not what it meant, you know, and I wouldn't have swapped. I wouldn't have been on the front line for anything. Power to anybody that was. I was very lucky that I could shut myself away for 2 years. Yeah. But the mental health impact of that was enormous. And I found the whole executive functioning element of self-motivating every day really tough. I'm fine when someone says, be here at this time. When it's led by me, I just can't. It's not great. And I was having a real thing that Lana was touching on, thinking, I could have done this, I could have done that. Why haven't I done this? And I did a Facebook post about it. And Jo Butler, who's here today, messaged me and she said, and this was just the most lovely thing, you have to remember that you are a human being, not a human doing. And that's written in my skull now. And I just tell that to myself every day. We are not defined by what we do, we're defined by what we are. And giving myself permission, like Sarah Jane said, to just be some days. Some days is a can't day. And today I give myself permission to be. I'm still working on that. But I also think, you know, any of us, and hopefully it's different for younger folk coming up, but there's going to be a lot of internalised ableism in a lot of us. And it certainly is in me. And a lot of, I should just try harder. I could do more if I just push myself. Mask, conceal, hide, try harder, push through. And I think we're far more critical of us than outsiders would be. And I think we only process what we think we haven't done, not what we have. I mean, it doesn't need me to say, Lana, but you've done phenomenal things in your career, for goodness sake. And how many hundreds, if not thousands, of young people have you changed the lives of in terms of not only being a role model, but empowering them to advocate for themselves? But we only tend to process the bits we think we don't do, rather than the bits that we do, and it's ridiculous. And I'm trying to be adult and not giggle at the fact that I've just said do on a Q&A. That pleases me.
That's good. That's good.
But we tend to only focus on what we didn't get done that day. And I've got a friend, a fellow autistic friend, who's been phenomenal with me this last year or so. And I hope I've been remotely as helpful in return. And we speak on Messenger most days. And she said to me the other day, what have you done today? I said, it's been a calm day. I've not done much. I said, I've done this, and this. But I didn't do. She went, hang on a minute. You've just listed 8 things you've done. And she calls it a do's a day. You've had a do's a day. You did stuff. We don't give ourselves credit for what we do achieve. I think and I've worked with a lot of autistic young people who will come home from school saying, today was a really rubbish day. Everything was crap. And then when you unpick it, the majority of the day was fine and dandy. There was a difficult moment at some point, and that then defined the entire experience. I think sometimes we hold on to the what we think is the negative, and don't process. We take for granted the bits that went well. That's just a few. That was all right. When we don't necessarily process what we've achieved either. So I think you're fabulous, Lana, as you all are. Okay, on to the next question. It links on to Lana, actually. And it's something somebody asked in the questions, but also something I wanted to ask. In all 3, I believe, of you, Sarah Jane, Katie, Lana, are parents. I don't have that privilege, but by choice. But what I wanted to know was, as someone who won't ever experience this, because it isn't the path I want to follow, I'm fascinated by the experience of folks that have. And what I wonder is, and Lana touched on this in her presentation, all of the the social expectations that are placed on parents. You're talking about mother and baby group and toddler group and school gates and all of this. You know, there are so many organisations now that talk about, you know, how fabulous autistic parents are. The Autistic Parents Network, I think, has just launched, I think led by Shona Davis and others, which is fabulous. Autistic Parents UK, actually, fabulous. Who are ringing the bell for the fact that autistic people are fabulous parents, because very often we're accused of being the opposite. However, I wonder, as somebody who needs a lot of alone time, as somebody who doesn't like too much social expectation and pressure, how do you balance that need with the undeniable pressures that a child puts on your time and on your energy, Lana?
I think for me, I had no understanding whatsoever of what having a child would do to me, if you like. When I had my first child, I was 19, well, I was 20 when I had him, and I think it hit me like probably like a train, because I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. I had all these people were coming into my home. I'd had to kind of get through the hospital side of things, where I never saw the same person, which even now, you know, 15 or whatever it is years, however many years after I've written the book, we're still in that position, probably a little bit more actually, because of COVID and people leaving the profession. But I didn't understand, and even now it's really bizarre kind of looking back when I was preparing for the talk, and I look back and I thought, you've got 6 children. You have got 6 children. How did that happen? I mean, I know how it happened.
We could draw you a diagram, Lana.
Yes, yeah, we did have sex education at school. I was probably absent or something at that point. I don't know. It's probably in the toilet or something.
You found them all under a cabbage patch in the garden, did you? Yeah,
no, the stork bought all of them. The stork bought all of them. So I kind of stop and think, how did I manage? And now when I look back, because the 4 of them, my 4 older children, were very close together. And it's almost if I was on adrenaline, and I just did it, and I just got through it. But obviously I didn't have my diagnosis with the first five children. So I kind of whizzed through it, but I always had to be in my head this perfect parent. You know, I was constantly thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, they've all got to have this. You know, I've got to put the mask was on constantly, and it wore me out, and I did struggle with that. I didn't have the alone time. I had to interact with other neurotypical parents, which I found really hard, and then would come home thinking, should I have said that to them? They'll probably think I'm really weird. Why did I? You know, we all know, don't we, the overthinking that happens. And I just think, looking back on it now, and again, this is where we go through the processing of kind of beating ourselves up. I look back and I think, oh, my kids must have had a really rubbish childhood, because I didn't do this, and I didn't take them here, and I didn't like that. And I think I said in the talk, you know, they were under strict instructions when they came out of school. Don't ask if you can bring a friend home. I need time, I need to plan, I need to prepare. It needs to be done on a day, you know, 2 weeks down the road. And if ever they came out, because a couple of them would, and go with said friend, oh, can Tom come today? And they're both standing there, they're going, and I'd be like, oh, let's have a word with their mum. And it was really hard. And looking back on it now, I kind of think, A, why did I do that to myself? Why did I feel that I had to be this perfect parent? And B, it was also the most rewarding and fulfilling time of my life. There must have been some good bits in there, but it's almost like I've washed them away. And I don't know, you probably have to ask my kids what they thought of their childhood, whether it was as bad as I think it was, with them all kind of being herded, and me kind of trying to control who came round and who did what. But you'd have to ask them. But I think certainly with my youngest child, I'm much more relaxed. I know the things that are going to give me a problem, and I know the things that are going to be quite stressful for me, and strangely enough, they're stressful for him as well. So actually that aligns quite well in what we do. So yeah, did I answer the question again? I've rambled again.
No, you absolutely did. I have to say, I was listening to your presentation on my walk to the chemist one afternoon, Lana.
Oh, that's nice.
So it was for Katie, it was Asda. For you, it was the chemist. For Sarah Jane, I was cooking dinner last night, and because I have to do while I listen, I can't just sit and listen. And I was walking to the chemist listening, and when you talked in the presentation about your children saying, "Can I just bring home X, Y, and Z?" I shuddered. I physically shuddered in the street. Nothing worse than unexpected surprise people.
Absolutely. I do happen to remember that when I was pregnant, there was a lady that worked at a supermarket, and I'm not going to give details just in case she so happens to be watching this. My ex-husband had kind of said, "Oh, you know, you've got a child and she's pregnant, and why don't you meet up? Why don't you go around?" And I was like, hence why he's the ex-husband, lots of other reasons as well. But I can remember she did come round and I hid behind the sofa. So there I am with my big pregnant belly on all fours hiding behind the sofa, and she looked through the window. And I was thinking, I bet my foot's sticking out or my bum's sticking out or something. And I was hot, you know, it was terrible. It was awful. It was a horrible experience. And she was there for ages knocking on the door because he'd given her the address. And I just kept thinking, please go away. And then afterwards, I thought, what's wrong with you? Why couldn't you let that person in? There's something wrong with you. But now I'm very open and say, do you know what? Don't come knocking on my door. I've got a sign on the door. Don't come knocking on my door because I'm not going to open it to you unless I'm expecting it. I've invited you. That also goes for my children. Just put that out there.
My partner jokes. He sent me a picture of a doormat the other day. He said, "I need to buy this for you." And on the doormat it said, "There is no reason for you to be here."
Absolutely. Can he get me one as well? And I'll transfer the money. Be really good.
Katie, any thoughts? How old's your little one?
He's 14 months now. So I had a completely different experience to Lana, actually. But like when you said about your ex-husband like pairing you up with someone else who has a child, like I find it the strangest thing in the whole world that people would be paired up or grouped together simply because the only thing we have in common with each other is we had children. And I just think that is the most peculiar reason to put a group of people together or expect us to get along with each other or have the same kind of parenting ideals or anything like that. I just find it quite mind-boggling, actually. So my experience of my community midwife missed the fact that I'm autistic on my paperwork. And until I was 7 months pregnant, no one who was looking after, well, there was someone in the diabetes team. This is going to sound really strange, but thank goodness I had gestational diabetes because there was a supporting midwife there who, I don't know if I told her I was autistic or she just knew and she'd been working with disabled people before. So she like saw something in me and was like, "I'm going to see you every 2 weeks when you come in here. It's going to be me that you see, and this is the chair we're going to use, and this is what we're going to do." And they had visuals and all sorts going on. Really, really brilliant. But because that had been missed off my paperwork, and with COVID the way things were, my husband wasn't going to be in the room with me. Well, the idea of going into a hospital in a place that I don't know, I'm just about to have my first baby, like horrifying. So the idea of having like a meltdown and it's just beyond. So thankfully this supporting midwife, and it just happened by kismet. Like I had my ASD, my whole diagnosis in my bag because I was sending off for some kind of benefits. So, and I was like, will this help with what you guys need? And they were like, yes. And I was like, oh my God. And then my husband could go in with me. But yeah, it was just totally and utterly missed off my midwife paperwork. And I think it's because the question they asked was whether you have any learning difficulties. No, I don't have any learning difficulties. Do you have any mental health? Okay, then I spoke about that. But like autism isn't a learning disability. Not that there's anything wrong with learning disability, of course not. But it's not what it's classified as. So I think that's the miscommunication there. But since like having him and like things have opened up, after lockdowns and stuff, the local play group that I go to is full of neurodivergent mums and dads. Absolutely chocker full of neurodivergent. We've got a few people there who've got Ehlers-Danlos, ADHD, undiagnosed like autistic and various other things going on. Like, I've just really lucked out with the play group we have near us, and actually it's lovely because it's also run by like a social enterprise, like disability, not a charity, but it's a social enterprise, if that makes sense. So all the people who are working in the cafe are also disabled as well. So I've just like really like, it's like 5 minutes around the corner from me. So I don't know, like, obviously I have like there's a big disabled community here where I live, surprisingly, which is lovely. But no, the idea of going to like a baby singing sign, which would be, well, my kind of thing. I just think, well, first of all, when it was COVID, you know, and they were saying, oh, well, you can't bring your pushchair in, and you can't do this, and you have to sit on that, and you can't do this, and you know, if the moon's in retrograde of Venus, then and I just thought, you know, I'm just not coming to this. This is too difficult for me to. The admin of this alone is beyond. So, and I just think, you know, I hear a lot of horror stories of, oh, my little Jonathan can do this, and your child can't do this, and like, I'm really not into that. And I want to talk to other adults about stuff that isn't about my baby, because I'm with my baby all the time and I love him and he's brilliant. But other people aren't going to think that. They're not, he's not their baby. So yeah, again, I don't know if I've actually answered any of that.
No, you have, absolutely. There's far too much self-doubt on this conversation.
Yeah. I lose the question and think
you were on topic the whole time.
Okay, that's good.
Sarah Jane, any thoughts on being an autistic parent?
Oh, dear God. Right. So I had no idea that I was autistic when I became a parent at all. And so I was so deeply into the whole masking, hiding, being the perfect parent thing that I lost myself completely. So I read every manual that you could ever have. I read the perfect little baby book, which I've now called the smug little baby book. And I don't think anybody who's never had children should be allowed to write any book to tell parents what to do. They should be ruled out immediately. So I read every book I was supposed to read. Unfortunately, my children didn't come with a manual, and the manuals that were written for parenting didn't apply to the children I had. And I spent ages trying to squeeze, pitchfork, bully, shout, do all the things you're not meant to do that basically torture your children and you. And I got it wrong for a very long time. And eventually my children, God bless them, taught me how to be a better parent. And I stopped trying to force them to be something that somebody else said they should be. And I started trying to listen to what they needed and what I needed. In the process, I had 3 burnouts and 2 breakdowns. It was really, really tough. And the question that was asked originally was, how do you advocate for your children? I think that's the hardest thing ever. And I know that I drove myself to the edge of a full-on breakdown to argue and get support for my children because they needed it. If they hadn't needed it, I would not have done it, and I had no capacity for anything else. It wiped me out completely. And it has taken a lot of recovery time to get there. And I'm now fortunate I'm so flipping old that they're practically out there and doing most of it on their own. They're now 19 and 23. There is light at the end of the tunnel to any of you who have younger children and are thinking, oh my God, no, how am I going to cope? Just the things that I would say, and the things that I say to people that I'm working with who are younger, is do not ever put your needs onto the back burner, because you will not be able to support them if you're blown out. You have to put yourself first, and that is not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. I didn't do that. It made things worse. The second thing is that you have to prioritize like a diva, and your children come first and you come second. And that for me is what it is to be a parent, because your children didn't ask to have you. You kind of, we assume, chose to have them. That's kind of, however accidental that may have been. You know, there was a consensual part to it. I hope there was a consensual part to it. Please say there was a consensual part to it. I know that isn't always the case. But for most of us, we chose to have them. So even on the darkest, deepest, most appalling moment, those are sometimes the moments where you realize you're the steel in your core that will get you through. And you have no idea how strong you can be until you're fighting for someone who really needs you. And boy, do they really need you. So deep breath, shoulders back, big person pants on. You can and will do it. And sometimes the worst moments of your life are there for you to help you and to teach you and to make you stronger. And no, it is not nice. No, it is not pleasant. Yes, you can do it.
Fabulous. What a powerful answer. And I'm lucky enough to have met both of Sarah Jane's young people, and they are phenomenal humans as a result of the phenomenal work that Sarah Jane's done with them. So I'd say good job all round, Sarah Jane. I'm just sorry it was such a difficult journey to get to that point, but I'm hoping that you're at the top of the mountain enjoying the view now.
Hell yes, it's beautiful.
Nigella Lawson once said, and I want to touch on what Sarah Jane said there about, you know, it isn't selfish to prioritise self-care. Nigella Lawson once said, when you have children, you stop being the picture and become the frame. What? Why can't we both be the picture together? Why can't we make a, you know, the whole idea that parenting tells you you must leave your entire self out of it and just be a conduit for that person's growth. What do you do for 18 years? I think surely, as you've said, there has to be a balance where you prioritise you and where you prioritise your needs. You know, it's trite to say, but you can't pour from an empty cup, can you? And I think that's true in so many aspects, not just in parenting. One quick thing, because it's a theme that came up in a lot of the talks. Grace Liu talked about this. Sarah Jane talked about this. Robin touched on it in terms of safeguarding. I wanted to think briefly about friendship. So we know that, Grace touched on this a lot about toxic friendship. We know that autistic people are more vulnerable to being preyed on by people that will take advantage of them, by friends that mistreat them. You know, some research was done about 8 years ago by the NAS that found nearly 50% of autistic adults said they felt they'd been mistreated by a friend, and 39% said they felt they'd been manipulated by a friend into doing something they didn't want to do. Of course, this speaks everything about society and not about autistic people. You know, this is the fault of the perpetrator. But what can we do to support autistic young people to identify when somebody is mistreating them and to identify when a friendship is toxic? What can we do to help them to sniff out those non-friends? Sarah Jane?
Oh, I love this one. So in our family, we've done a lot of this. So we have had to teach what a good friend is, what a bad friend is, and that a good friend will always want the best for you and will not make you feel less than or inadequate or unnecessary or too much. And I was reflecting the other day whilst I was locked in my attic garret with COVID. My lovely daughter, who's now 23, sent me the most amazing set of films on YouTube, and it's A Therapist Reacts To. And the one thing that they sent this week was a therapist reacts to toxic positivity, which I thought was really good in terms of helping to understand that. And they used Encanto as the example, and they looked at how the family dynamic worked and how everything had to look perfect, but actually it wasn't, and they analysed how it all worked. And I think often we can use things like those sort of resources to use characters to assess how they work, to look at the interactions between those characters in a way that isn't you are struggling with this situation. It's kind of, what does this dynamic look like? This is something you can study. This is something you can apply. A good friendship looks like this. A bad friendship looks like this.
Absolutely, and identifying the difference. Robin Stewart, in her book, The Independent Guide to Super Safe Living on the Autism Spectrum, or words to that effect, has in there what she calls the ladder of trust, that I think is a really lovely resource to help the person build up the layers of trust like an onion. You know, I've just met someone, what information, what touch is okay, what information and touch isn't okay. Katie, any thoughts on toxic friendship?
Oh, many, many. Yeah, I think, like, again, things aren't spoken, like we aren't spoken to as young people about like boundary setting and what red flags look like. And I'm always bashing on relationship and sex education, but like this should be like a core part of that. And also not just what your boundaries are, but what other people's are, and how you have to respect that. It's something I have to work with our kids with a lot, with personal space and stuff. I don't necessarily have any advice for that outside of actually what Sarah Jane's just said about using not necessarily special interests, but you know, characters, age and stage appropriate kind of ideas, stories, stuff like that, as examples to make it more abstract. So to take yourself outside of it and to have a look at it that way. I will just say, if I may, Evelyn Welton brought out a book, Standing Up for Myself, which is a workbook that autistic young people can do. I think she's also making an adult version as well. I think she's writing that at the moment, which is very, very good, full of really good resources. I liked especially in that there was a Not My Stuff bin, and there was I don't know if any of you guys have read it, but like there was a picture of a bin, and it was basically about all the things that people reflect onto you and how you would put all of those things into the Not My Stuff bin. And I feel like it's taken me until my early 30s to realize that how people treat me is not actually really a reflection on me. Like, unless I've done something like harsh or something like that, which is not really in my nature, but perhaps accidentally, like the way that people get hateful or nasty or manipulative or whatever it is, actually doesn't reflect on me at all. So I can't really take it personally, because it's not mine to take personally, because I'm really happy in my life and I'm a really nice person and I'm confident in who I am. So whatever strange things you've got to say about me or anything like that, that's your business, mate. That's not my business. But that's a really, you know, that's taken me a long time to get to that. So it's something I'm trying to instill in the kids that I work with as well, but trying to work out that it's not personal, even though it is happening to you, is a really, really difficult thing to get your head around.
Absolutely. I think there's a real power also there in the whole idea of what belongs to me and what isn't mine. You know, I always think to myself, and this has helped me a lot in my life, and again, it's an ongoing process. If somebody makes a criticism of you, it is far more important to think about who is saying it than what's been said. Mm-hmm. Because that will tell you an awful lot about the intent. So who's saying it? Do you value who that person is? Do you value their opinion? No. Well, then their opinion's just white noise. It's not for me. Are they my audience? No. And accepting that, you know, one of the things that's really helped me in my 30s is realizing I don't want everybody to like me, because I don't like everybody. Why would I care what someone thinks of me if I wouldn't let them in my house? Although, to be fair, like I've said to Lana, nobody comes in my house. But anyhow, why would I value the opinion of people who don't matter to me? And also, I think that approach of what's for me and what isn't for me has worked really well for me as someone who experiences OCD as well. I treat my thoughts like post. What's for me? What do I need to open and process? And what is junk mail? What is a thought that's just popped onto my map that isn't mine? It's just popped in. It's just a chemical reaction. I don't need to deal with it. Again, still a work in process, but having those baskets of what's for me, what isn't for me, has been really useful in that context too. Lana, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just sitting, you know, I obviously agree with everything that Sarah Jane and Katie and you said, Dean, and I was just thinking about, it seems that starts to come as we get older. We start to recognize that. I know that a lot of the young people that I work with have these particular difficulties around, some of them have been out of school for quite a long period of time, so they never really got socialization. If they're in a mainstream provision, then wherever they go to next, they're desperate to, you know, all this rubbish about, you know, all autistic people don't want friendships. You know, we're individuals, and some of these kids are at a stage where they really want those friendships, and they'll take any friendship that's offered. And then it becomes really hard as time goes on to work with them and say, but actually what you're telling me is that this friendship isn't helping you, it's making you feel these uncomfortable things. So I think I agree with Katie that, you know, I think we need to start the dialogue early on with our young people, whether they're autistic or not. It's just much more specific and finite, and it takes longer with our autistic young people or our neurodivergent young people. But we should be talking to them about what's a good relationship, what feels good, what's good for you, because there will be people that will try to say they're your friends but then don't act in a friendly and kind way, and that goes with, you know, with the kind of the sexual aspect of things as well. And I was just thinking, listening to you, after my diagnosis, the first autistic person I heard speak was Leanne Holiday Wiley at an NAS conference, and I sobbed through the talk. As she spoke to me afterwards, she clearly thought, you know, she'd done spoke and said something terrible, and I was off on the, you know, on the verge of kind of having some kind of terrible breakdown. But I cried with relief and sadness at what she was talking about. They've been my experiences, and I cried for that little person, that little girl that I'd been, and that teenage girl that I'd been, going through those awful situations with people I thought were friends, or people I thought loved me or cared about me, only to realise that they didn't. And I think it is so important for us to do this work with our young people when they're young, and to get this into them, that it's okay to say, this doesn't feel good to me, I'm not accepting this. But with our young people, some of them find that really hard to advocate for themselves, and I think it's up to us as autistic people, neurodiverse people, to be saying to them, it's okay to say that, you need to say that if that's uncomfortable, and teaching them what you know, what is uncomfortable. And with a lot of the young people I work with, you know, they'll kind of say, well, how long will you be working with me? And I'm quite open-ended on that. I'll say, well, I'm as long as you need me. I kind of imagine that I'm a bit like a bridge. Maybe I'm Tower Bridge, I'm not sure, I'm not good on bridges, but I'm a bit of a bridge, and that I walk with them and they walk alongside, and I kind of get them to that place they need to be, and then they'll go and do it on their own because they've got it and they understand. And I just think that it's so important for us to instill that into our young people, so that they can advocate and recognise bad relationships, recognise uncomfortable feelings and uncomfortable friendships,
and that they have a right to be treated well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because a lot of our youngsters don't realise that. No,
and that's not just being treated well by peers, that's being treated well by the adults around them. And I say that particularly with my school head on, that actually they have a right to be respected and to be treated as you know, young people do. But for our young people, sometimes they don't feel that they do have that right, do they? It's kind of, well, like, okay, and they need to know that they have that right.
And historically, so much push, you know, horrifically, but so much push on autistic folk has been about achieving compliance, saying yes to the adult regardless. I mean, regardless of the mental health and safeguarding horrors that provides. I think we need to invest, and you were saying this, we need to invest so much time in the opposite with our youngsters. We need to empower them to say no, and to say it often.
Yeah, absolutely. And that word, that whenever I go into a school, which I don't do so much anymore, which is probably good for my mental health, but whenever I go into a school and they say they just don't comply, the hackles go up on the back of my neck, and I'm like, Grr. Actually, I have growled a couple of times, which you know, it is what it is, isn't it? But it's kind of, stop with the compliance thing. You're an adult. If I said to you, you know, I've asked you to do this for this young person and you're not complying with me, how would you feel? You wouldn't like it. You'd be straight away, oh, don't tell me to comply. Stop telling our kids to comply, because actually a lot of the time our kids have got more sense than the adults around them. That, you know, I see it, I hear it, and they're kind of saying, just respect us, we respect you. It's a mutual two-way collaborative thing. Let's not keep getting our kids to comply, and let's not do things to them. They should be a partner in all of that.
Absolutely.
And I'll just, because I could just keep going.
I know that B wants us to draw together because we're over time, but I wanted to finish very briefly. So if we could have a few words from each of us before I hand over to B. I wanted to end briefly on something joyous. So I wanted to ask you, What brings you autistic joy? Sarah Jane.
So many things, actually. So many things. So from being out on my boat, where I love being out sailing and beating the hell out of all those boys who think they can do better. That's a big thing for me. To just looking, I mean, really, really looking at a flower on my daily walk when I'm out, even if it's only in the garden, because that's as far as I'm allowed to go when I've got COVID. And just really looking at the shape of it and the colour of it and smelling the smell of it. So really diving into those senses and loving the joy that that can bring. That's 2.
That's fabulous. Katie?
Yeah, again, I've got a lot. But actually just talking with other autistic people like this today is so much more comfortable and so much nicer to be. And I've only been probably doing the kind of advocacy work I've been doing for the last 2 years or so. This is still relatively new to me, but like, it's just respectful, it's calm, it's nice. Everyone's got something interesting to say. I was about to say we're all keeping on topic. I'm not convinced, but like vaguely, you know. So that's my joy, is finding other autistic people online. And actually quite a lot of my socializing I do online now, because now I know who I am and what I want and need from communication. Like, it's a lot easier to find similar others. Yeah, and sharing kind of interests and stuff is really good.
Fabulous. Lana?
Yeah, I'd agree, actually, Katie, with you. I'd forgotten over the past 2 years how much I enjoy interacting with other people who are neurodiverse, and I've missed that. And I would say the other thing that gives me great joy is when I'm working with a young person and they've had, as you said, Dean, about this medical model and the negatives, and they'll never do this and they'll won't do that, and then I turn around and say to them and to their parents sometimes, I'm autistic, and you can see the relief and the kind of, oh, that's why you get me then kind of thing. You just see that, and it just, even now I've got goosebumps, and the ability that I then have to sit with them and kind of flap and get all woo, and they're kind of like, oh, look, she does that, look, she, you know, and it's that feeling as well. That is what gives me the greatest joy, is working with young people and being able to say to them, you can be yourself. Look at me, you know, I'm flappy, I'm, you know, got the mental age of probably a 9-10-year-old, and I laugh a lot and I love being with you, and I just think you're amazing, and that's what gives me joy. I think as well, that was probably 2. And my dogs and my children. And sometimes my husband.
Nearly 5. Fabulous. And mine, very quickly, classic Doctor Who, Toya Wilcox. If Toya gets a part in Doctor Who, I will combust with autistic joy. And I guess the key thing is that we enable people to be their authentic selves, so they can spend more time on their joy and less time fighting for their right to exist. And I want to thank all of our speakers, including you 3 who are with us today, but all of the 6 or 7 speakers across the 2 weeks. I say again, if you haven't watched any of the sessions, go back and look at them. They're fabulous. Who are all fighting for people to have the right to be who they are. And I think what Lana said earlier, I wanted to finish with, is that all of us are learning around these areas. So my area is autism. My area is not gender. I know a bit about sexuality from my perspective, but not gender. There may be folks who know lots about gender, as someone was mentioning in one of the questions, but maybe don't have the knowledge about autism. And so it's about us all guiding each other. I'm sure, as Lana said, I'm sure I've used the wrong language at some point during this presentation. If I have, I apologise. But it's about intent, and all of us want to get it right for autistic people, however they identify, in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender, who they are. And it's about creating the space for those people to be who they are. And I think as a result of sessions like that, we're making some real headway. So thank you to all of you. I will hand over to Bea, who will close the session. And I thank you for giving us your afternoon, everybody.
A huge round of applause for all of our speakers, however you choose to commit to that. Great, thank you. Thank you to my colleague Usha for giving me a little pin there. I wanted to say an enormous thank you to all of our speakers, to Sarah Jane Critchley, to Lana Grant, to Katie Munday, and to Dean Beadle for hosting. A huge thanks to all of our speakers who pre-recorded talks, Sarah Davis, Robin Stewart, Laura Kate Dale, and Grace Liu. I must also thank my colleagues, Usha, who helped me book the speakers, write the emails, gave me lots of pep talks and encouragement, and to my colleague Camwa for helping handle emails and Zooms. I'm not sure people are aware, but I think all the speakers are aware I'm also autistic. I have ADHD, I'm autistic, yeah, and I'm non-binary too. And part of my motivation for putting on this conference was to put out there the kind of information that I really wished I'd had at the time when I was going through my diagnosis journey, or before then, before I really knew what autism was, before someone said to me, "Oh, has anyone ever told you you might be autistic?" So it's lovely to put this out there. It's lovely to give a platform to these people. I'm immensely grateful. Thank you all. This talk has been a delight. It has been funny. It's been moving. I've cried at points. It's been relatable. So I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have. And that brings the Spectrum of Experiences conference to a close. We are going to keep the talks up for some time for people to catch up if they would like to. So we've got pre-recorded talks from all our speakers, and yeah, what's left to say? So another huge thank you and a round of applause.
And can I say before we finish, in the words of Dolly Parton, because everything should end with the Dolly Parton quote. Dolly Parton said, and I hold this dear: find out who you are and then do it on purpose. And I think that sums up everything we've been trying to say across this hour. So thank you to One for continuing to deliver. And this conference has been phenomenal. The Autism Conference always is. And I'm honoured to be, even a small part of that and to be involved with you guys. And thank you to Bea and Usha and everybody in the team for putting this together. It's no small undertaking. And fingers crossed, I'll see you at the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here to host. Thank you, everybody. It's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Till next time.
Next time.